Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachade Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's running, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Time is moving. Okay. Right, so, Right, so here we go. Let us read the verse again. Let us read Nectar Instruction, verse 2. Atyahara prayashascha prajalpo niyama-agraha janasangas chalolyam cha shadbir bhaktir vinashyati. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. 2. Over-endeavoring for mundane things which are very difficult to obtain. 3. Talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. 4. Practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. Or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. 5. Associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And 6. Being greedy for mundane achievements. So there you go, devotees. That is verse 2. And last night we finished by discussing about prajalpa. And Srila Prabhupada goes on after prajalpa. Let me just get my notes up here properly. Okay, there we go. Srila Prabhupada goes on to, having discussed prajalpa, where are we here? Prajalpa. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada goes on to discuss janasanga. Now, in other words, it's a little out of the sequence, strictly speaking, according to the sequence of the Sanskrit in the verse. Next we would discuss Niyama-agraha. Anyway, Prabhupada sometimes he does these things, and that's fine because Niyama-agraha will be discussed, definitely. But here, though, Prabhupada goes on to talk about janasanga, or associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. Yes. So, well, an interesting point, which isn't specifically, the verse is not specifically quoted here, but elsewhere definitely Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya speaks the verse, and Srila Prabhupada has quoted it, referred to it on many occasions. There's a famous, Lord Chaitanya was asked, how can you recognize a Vaishnava? How can you recognize a devotee? So Lord Chaitanya replied, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnav Achar. Stri Sangi Eka Asadu Krishna Bhakta Ar. Mainly, actually, Prabhupada would refer to the first line. Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnav Achar. That you can always recognize a devotee, or Vaishnav Achar, the behavior of a devotee is Asat Sangha Tyaga, to renounce or reject. Asat Sangha means materialistic, temporary association. But particularly also Stri Sangi Ek Asadu Krishna Bhakta Ara. Literally, Prabhupada translates, common people are very much materially attached, especially to women. Now, ladies, I know there's quite a few of you out there in Facebook land right now, or Instagram land. Don't worry. We can just say the opposite sex. That's what we can say. The opposite sex. That's the idea. That's definitely the idea. So, common people are very much materially attached, especially to the opposite sex. Vaishnavas should also avoid the company of those who are not devotees of Lord Krishna. Anyway, here we're talking about Jana Sangha, associating with worldly-minded people. That's what this verse that we just quoted is all about. So let me just read what Prabhupada says here at the beginning of it's basically just a paragraph that he gives to Jana Sangha at this stage. Prabhupada says, Jana Sangha refers to associating with people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. One should strictly avoid such association. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has therefore advised that we should live only in the association of Krishna conscious devotees. Bhakta Sanevas. One should always engage in the service of the Lord, in the association of the Lord's devotees. And Prabhupada goes on to point out that people who have the same interests, they gravitate towards each other, even officially, meaning they form clubs, societies, organizations of people who have certain specific interests. This is just a big part of material life. So Prabhupada goes on to say that therefore he formed ISKCON, so that people could associate with pure devotees. With pure devotees. You know who that means? You know who that's meant to mean? Devotees out there in internet land. That means you. Really. It really means you. That's what it means. That we have got the facility in ISKCON for becoming pure devotees. All facility is there. Nothing is lacking. So we should try and take Krishna consciousness seriously and become that sort of person who will be able to help the people in general as they come and visit our temples and programs, as we meet them in the streets while preaching, etc., etc. We should really try. Even to the point that Srila Prabhupada said that if all you know about Krishna consciousness is that prasadam tastes good, just tell people that, and distribute some prasadam. That's all. Yeah. And you'll be helping them, as Prabhupada is saying here, giving them that type of association which will move them and which will change them, at least step by step. So, let me just tell you one little story. Some of you, I know, are familiar with this story. It's a really nice story. And it actually revolves around the verse or couple of verses from Narottam Das Thakur, which Srila Prabhupada has he? Or hasn't he? Oh, he has. Which Prabhupada has quoted in the purport, Bhakta Sane Vas. Bhakta devotee, Sane Vas, to live with. So, His Holiness Bibi Govinda Maharaj, very wonderful devotee, just incredibly wonderful devotee. I offer my humble obeisances at his sacred lotus feet. He was there in Vrindavan. When, just as Prabhupada was in the process of performing his disappearance pastime, just building up to that over the whatever few weeks or whatever some number of days before Prabhupada left this world. And he, Govinda Maharaj, and various devotees who were there, they would go in and have kirtan. There was 24-hour kirtan going on. So one day when Govinda Maharaj was there, one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers named Krishnadas Babaji arrived. And he had a friendly, kind of informal, a heartfelt relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Nice relationship. So he came in and jumped on the bed. Prabhupada was lying on a bed. And he just jumped on the bed at the end by Prabhupada's lotus feet. And he started joking with Prabhupada. You know, Prabhupada was in an extremely grave mood, really grave mood, generally, and not really saying hardly anything. But Krishnadas Babaji jumped on the bed and started laughing and joking. And Prabhupada got caught up in that mood also and started smiling and then laughing and saying some things reciprocating. So, yeah, it was going on like that. Then, and the devotees are just sitting and watching. Then suddenly, after a few minutes, Prabhupada just stopped and turned to the devotees gathered there, like the kirtan party and whoever else was there. And he pointed at them and said, Tandara Charana Sevi, Bhakta Sanevas, Janame Hoy, E Abhilas. This is what Prabhupada's referring to here from Narottam Das Thakur. Tandara Charana Sevi, Bhakta Sanevas. All I want to do is live with the devotees and serve their lotus feet. Janame hoy e abhilas. That's my only desire, birth after birth. And then he turned back to Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. And again, this sort of very light-hearted exchange went on for a couple of minutes or something. And then suddenly Prabhupada turned to the disciples. Tandera Charana Sevi, Bhakta Sane Vas, Janame Janame Hoy, E Abhilas. The same verse. All I want to do is live in the association of devotees and serve their lotus feet. It's my only desire, birth after birth. And then he turned back to Krishnadas Babaji. And again, back into this kind of light-hearted, humorous exchange for a few minutes. And then, for a third time, Prabhupada turned to the disciples. Tandera Charana Sevi, Bhakta Sane Vas, Janame Janame Hoy, E Abhilas. Same verse. So, this is a very important point. Very important point. So, yes, so Prabhupada dedicates a paragraph to that. And then, would you believe that beginning from the next paragraph, which is, we're on page, what is it? Page 12, until the last paragraph on page 13, Srila Prabhupada, would you believe, it's really interesting. He dedicates this whole page and a half. He goes back to Atyahara. He goes back to Atyahara. The very first one, eating more than necessary, or particularly he talks actually about collecting more funds than required and material facilities and all that. So that's interesting. That's interesting. Extremely interesting. Where are we? Yeah. Is it? Is what I'm saying right? Oh no. No, I'm sorry. I'm misleading you. A buzzing sound? A buzzing sound. Is it plugged in properly? How's the sound in Facebook? Is the sound on Facebook okay? Can you just send us a little message? Sorry about this. Buzzing. How many devotees are saying? Well, okay, I tell you what. Really? Did it just start? Did it just start now? There is still buzzing. How's that? Still, is it still buzzing? It stopped for a second. Is it still there? But is it still... Wow. Now is good, says Madan Mohan. Is it okay? It's okay. Better. Sorry about this. Sometimes these... Is it still buzzing? I don't know what to say. It has stopped. It's gone. Can you hear okay now?
Yeah, they said it's gone.
All right. Okay. Then I just have to speak a bit louder because we've unplugged this microphone. Okay. All right. So we carry on. Where are we though? No, I've been... so Prabhupada goes on to talk about Atyahara. Oh, I got to check here, get myself together. From the second to last paragraph on page 12 of the PDF, someone said that it's on page 26 in the printed book. Aha. Okay. And it goes on, Prabhupada talks further about Atyahara again. You know, Prabhupada from time to time, he goes back and comes back and, you know, like that, not exactly linear. Anyway, so for a couple of paragraphs, Prabhupada goes on about Atyahara, explaining that the efforts of the mental speculators and people like that to accumulate knowledge and figure things out and all that sort of thing, dry philosophers, it falls in the category of Atyahara, collecting more stuff than you required. You may remember yesterday I mentioned that that there's a form of collecting things too much where some devotees may try to read too many books so they can become famous for being very knowledgeable. So that's collecting more than required also. So anyway, Prabhupada talks about this for a couple of paragraphs, and he tells a fairly well-known story which he told on a few occasions to illustrate the futility, the uselessness of accumulating stuff like money. Well, specifically the stories about accumulating money. Prabhupada tells the story, which he, like I say, he told on a few occasions, of a person who, in the beginning of his life, he was poor, but somehow or other, he started a shoe business, and he became a very wealthy shoe manufacturer type of person. And he's very successful, and he had his family and some children, and when he was old, the children took over the business, and then he died. And because he had actually been sinful, he'd been a sinful person, therefore, when he died, he was born as a very poor man, but in the same neighborhood, in the same area. But very poor, and he lived by begging. And Prabhupada explains how one time he went to the house where his family was still living, the house which he built when he was living as a successful shoe businessman. He went to the same house where his family was still living to beg some money from them just so he could survive. But the children, his sons and grandsons, chased him away and beat him with the same shoes with which he had made his fortune in the previous life. This is Atyahara. Okay. So now where are we? We're on page 13. Let's just check. Yes, we are on page 13 of the PDF file. Don't ask me, if you're reading from a printed book, you have to figure out where we are. But there's now a paragraph, one paragraph, about a sort of a more subtle, in certain respects at least, more subtle point than some of these others. And yeah, it's a very interesting point, although Prabhupada only discusses it for a paragraph. And it's on page 13. It's the paragraph just beginning a few lines down from the top of the page. So yeah, first paragraph, page 13 in the PDF file. So now the word itself in the verse, one single word in the verse, which this whole discussion is based on and is about, is Niyama-agraha. Niyama-agraha. And as we read in the translation of the verse, Prabhupada translates it in two ways. One is practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. So that's one. Or second, rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. So these are two meanings, like quite different from each other, which are construed from the one word, Niyama-agraha. So Prabhupada does explain in that paragraph how he has arrived at that, idea of the meaning that there is that this word Niyama-agraha is a compound of two words. It's a compound of two words. First word is niyama. Niyama means basically a rule. The second word, which is then joined onto niyama, is, well, there are two variations. One is agraha, and the other is agraha. I hope you're following. Agraha and agraha, which means failure to accept, and agraha, which means eagerness to accept. Prabhupada actually expresses like that in that paragraph. So, so we end up with a word, one word compound, Niyama-agraha, because when niyama meets or joins with agraha, it becomes Niyama-agraha, a long A, and when niyama meets with agraha, it becomes Niyama-agraha, exactly the same. You cannot distinguish that the word was formed, you cannot distinguish from looking at the word itself how the word was formed, either from agraha or agraha, because when these words join, you just, in both cases, you just get a long A. It's not when niyama meets agraha that you get like a super long A. It's just the same as the long A when niyama meets agraha. So therefore, it's interpreted or understood in these two ways. So, in the first case of, let's see, in the first case of eagerness to accept, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations. Yes, we are practicing them, but only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. So, there are different types of situations in which people, or devotees even, may do this. Some examples of Niyama-agraha, when it is taken to mean an enthusiasm to accept rules and regulations, but without a deeper understanding or deeper motivation. This is very important. So, here's a few examples. Accepting the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness for economic advancement. Prabhupada mentions that example type of case in the purport there, that someone may think, I will chant Hare Krishna or practice devotional service. I will practice Krishna consciousness in order to get some material type of thing. It can also mean following the rules and regulations, practicing Krishna consciousness to get name and fame. I'll become a well-known devotee. You know, when I go around and visit the Hindu community, oh, they'll say, oh, the Swami has come. They'll invite me in and give me juice and fruit and maybe money too. Yeah. So I'll become a little famous. If I was just some ordinary person off the street, they're not going to do that. But now I'm applying the rules and regulations for that sort of result, and it's important to me for name and fame. Another example is that, and this is one that Prabhupada gives elsewhere. I did a little research into this yesterday. Prabhupada says that superficially, a devotee may show himself or herself to be very calm, not actually be fixed, in real Krishna consciousness. Like an example, and sometimes we jokingly give this example at other times too, that on Sunday the devotee comes to the temple when there's not a lockdown, nicely dressed, oh, in all nice Vaishnav dress, nicely ironed, everything's in the right place, beautiful tilak, and so on and so forth. And then in the program, you know, sort of going out of his or her way to be nice and do things nice. These sorts of things happen. But then they go home after the program, and if you know the example that I give, as soon as they go home, they lock the door, and on comes some pop music, or on comes the television with just some, you know, mundane whatever's on television. So yeah, so this is another example. Another example which Prabhupada gives, is it here? I don't think it's here, but elsewhere which I encountered, is imitating more advanced devotees. It's the same sort of idea. following the rules and regulations through imitation, but there isn't really a deeper understanding, and certainly not a deeper realization. Here's an interesting one. It applies perhaps more to Brahmins, sometimes in ISKCON, becoming attached to doing flashy rituals, ceremonies, different yagyas for this, for that. If things are not going well, oh, we must do a Nrsinga yagya. Or if something, you ran out of money, we must do a Lakshmi yagya, whatever, this sort of idea. But so one has become attached to superficial rules and regulations rather than the chanting of Hare Krishna. Well, here's an interesting example. Sometimes in devotional service, devotees have to go undercover, disguise themselves. I have done it to a fair degree. For example, when we're collecting to build Radharadhanath temple, we just wore kami clothes, and we actually cut off our seekers. Look at my seeker. Cut it off, eliminated it completely. We took off our neck beads. But now someone who's very attached to rules and regulations may say, oh, this is Maya, this is not good. But actually it was done in service to the Lord, and it was extremely successful. It was just hugely, hugely successful. And as a result, the Radharadhanath temple was built, and our temple in Johannesburg was purchased. And when it was sold, after a little while, we got Lenasia. It's all coming from that time. It's all coming from that time completely. Yeah. But someone who's attached to rules and regulations just for the sake of following them and not for some deeper type of Krishna conscious reason, then they may take something like that as being, you're in Maya. But all the devotees involved, they were really doing very strong sadhana and huge collections. Anyway, so that's another example. Here's another possible example. Just blindly following rules, not knowing why, just because. Yeah. So that's related. And another possibility is being too attached to jnana or karma in the context of Krishna consciousness. So in all these cases, one is not concerned about pleasing Krishna, but there's some other idea. There's some other idea why one is doing all these things. Then neglecting the rules and regulations, then that, of course, neglecting the rules and regulations, well, that's Niyama-agraha with the agraha at the end. So, but anyway, there's some examples, like living extravagantly in Krishna consciousness. Not simple living and high thinking, but high living and well, some sort of Krishna conscious thinking, but it's going to be sort of adulterated. Yeah, living extravagantly. Then here's another one, a very obvious one: neglecting the rules and regulations, acting independently, whimsically, not following all the regulative principles. That's a classic, not following all the principles. Well, including like not following all four regulative principles, not chanting all our rounds. Here's a real classic, This may be a little difficult for some of you out there in internet land to really digest or maybe even actually understand what the meaning is. But conceiving children not according to the standards that Srila Prabhupada gave us. Prabhupada gave us very specific standards for grihastas, for devotees who want to conceive children, how the conception should take place. We won't go into all the details of that, but I mean, obviously it's connected to not following all the regulative principles, that sex life becomes, at least first of all, it becomes not just for the sake of producing children, but it becomes just more just for personal pleasure. And how about, here's a good one, not getting up early in the morning. Not getting up early in the morning. Anyway, if you're a householder and you're working and you've got to deal with different things, and even so many things, and in some cases it may be difficult to get up early, but Prabhupada really did like it. And he advocated that we get up at least around 4 o'clock. Now, we're not going to sort of beat someone over the head and, wag our finger at them if they find it difficult for whatever reason. But bear it in mind, that Prabhupada really recommended it. Strongly, really recommended it, very strongly. And one devotee told us, fasten your seatbelts. We maybe we'll close with this, I think, and we'll just carry on tomorrow and, hopefully finish verse 2 tomorrow. But one devotee told us that Prabhupada was asked once, is there a good reason, excuse, or let's say reason, for not attending Mangal Arati? Is there a good reason? And Prabhupada, according to what this devotee said, Prabhupada said, yes, death. Yeah, anyway. I don't know if that's one of those Prabhupada said stories, which Prabhupada didn't appreciate because he didn't actually say them. But we have heard this. We have definitely heard this. So anyway, now the thing is that there is a bit more purport to go. There is a bit more what to do. Well, actually, you know what? I think I'll take another couple of minutes. Is that okay? Yeah, and finish. Let's do it. We can do it, actually. It's not that difficult. Because Prabhupada basically after this whole discussion about Niyama-agraha, very important, relevant, practical discussion about Niyama-agraha, Prabhupada, well, he goes into the subject of, let's have a look here, what does he, wow. Yeah, he goes into the subject of, he goes into the subject of point number 6, being greedy for mundane achievements. In our PDF file, hey, I'm getting a bit confused here. PDF file, all right, okay. In our PDF file, Prabhupada gets into a discussion. It's partly about Atyahara, or accumulation, but then it goes into lolium, kind of a bit connected with Atyahara also. I mean, definitely connected. Yeah, because there's a fairly obvious connection in many ways. So, Prabhupada, right at the bottom of page 13 in our PDF file, there's a paragraph beginning, modern warfare. Modern warfare waged between capitalists and communists is Atyahara. Yes, it is definitely, it's Atyahara. An attempt to collect more than necessary. And Prabhupada makes the point that it doesn't really matter if the communists are ruling or the capitalists, because they're both going to abuse. They're both going to try and take money and take advantage of the system. Yeah. Because at heart, they're sort of really deeper in their hearts, they're kind of on the same level. They're just materially attached. They're just addressing that in different ways on the surface. So, and Prabhupada makes the point that it's actually, when there's just over the page, on page 14, first paragraph, which begins simply transferring wealth from capitalists to communists. So it cannot solve the problem of modern politics, because it's been demonstrated that when a communist gets money, he uses it for his own sense gratification. I remember when I was young, seeing a cartoon it was actually in Punch magazine, if you've ever heard about that, kind of humorous British magazine. So there was a cartoon and it was illustrating Leonid Brezhnev, if you've heard of him, previous, head of communist Russia, going back a little while, and his mother. Because Leonid Brezhnev, who was the top man in Russia, the top communist, he had got the Aston Martin motor company to drive a car to him in Moscow from England so he could test it and see if he wanted to buy it. Yeah, it was in the news. And Aston Martin motor car, anyway, you can look it up, Google it, and you're looking at not less than $100,000, probably more, and there's some versions around $1 million. It is just, for the extremely wealthy. So, but there's Leonid Brezhnev, And now in the cartoon, his mother is speaking to him. And the subject is the car. And she says, well, you know, this car, you know, it's okay, Leonard. It's all right if you want it. You know, if you want it, well, you can have it. But Leonard, what are you going to do if the communists take over? Did you get it? Because he's the chief communist. He's the chief communist. But she's saying, you know, watch out if the communists take over. Because communists don't drive around in, you know, super wealthy people's motor cars. Anyway, then Prabhupada goes on. He quotes the Ishavasya verse, which we mentioned last night. Everything belongs to the Lord. Everyone has their quota. Nobody should take anyone else's quota. We should live like this. This is Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada discusses this. He discusses this. And that we shouldn't be greedy. Lolium. We shouldn't be greedy. Lolium or Atyahara. We shouldn't be like that. But rather we should live simple lives in Krishna consciousness. Let me conclude right now by reading the last few sentences of the purport, which sums it up really nicely. When human society gives up these elementary faults enumerated by Srila Rupa Goswami, Atyahara, etc., all enmity will cease between men and animals, capitalists and communists, and so forth. Yeah, because they won't be taking more than their quota, so people won't be placed in difficulty and then have revolutions because they can't live. You know, they're sick of being exploited. So all enmity will cease. In addition, all problems of economic or political maladjustment and instability will be solved. Everyone will be able to live nicely. This pure consciousness is awakened by the proper spiritual education and practice offered scientifically by the Krishna consciousness movement. This Krishna consciousness movement offers a spiritual community that can bring about a peaceful condition in the world. Every intelligent man should purify his consciousness and rid himself of the above-mentioned 6 hindrances to devotional service by taking wholehearted shelter of this Krishna consciousness movement. Okay, so we concluded verse 2. Just see. That's good, actually. Maybe the last part we skipped through a little quickly, but, you know, we covered everything, basically. So we'll start verse 3 tomorrow. This verse here, number 2, was about the problems. Warning, watch out. The next verse 3 is about the good things we must cultivate to really advance and make progress in Krishna consciousness and become very happy in Krishna consciousness. So it's a really nice verse and really nice purport. Okay, so questions. Oh, well, anyway, I said tomorrow we'll go on to verse 3. We'll do the questions for verse 2 first, though, of course. So you know, I hope, how to submit questions. Submit your questions. And Premagni and Kirti Kumari Radhe, send them to me, at least in the morning. And so tomorrow night, we will answer the questions. And if there's time, we'll start verse 3. Otherwise, we'll start it the next night. So there you go. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki.